Let's give a big round of applause for Mr. BN Duke.
What would it be like if we had no teachers? I can tell you what it would be like, because when we started out, we being Jimmy Heath, Philly Joe Jones, John Coltrane, Percy Heath, Red Rodney, all in Philadelphia, there were no teachers. There were no jazz programs. And what we got, our school was the old 78 records. You probably don't remember anything about 78 records. We used to pay 37 cents for each 78 record. There was an A side and a B side, 2 songs. And that was it, 3 minutes on each side. And when we got the first thing, John Coltrane and I used to practice in my living room. And we were pretty, before I met him, I mean, when I got my saxophone, people wanted to kill me because it was summertime and the windows were open. And then I met him, and he joined me, and they wanted to kill 2 people. It was pretty bad. Yeah, we got hired in a big local band, and they hired both of us at the same time, and they fired both of us at the same time. We were not so good then, you know. You always have to start from the ground level. Yeah, we got better though. If you get caught playing any jazz, you're going to be expelled. I said, my goodness, why am I here? My mother thought, well, you might not be successful. You need to have something else in your back pocket. You better go to college. And that's what I did. And it was kind of hairy because I got a jazz gig there. And the dormitories were locked at night, so I had to get back in. But well, what I had to do was learn how to climb over the back wall, and then I could get back in. This is what happened. I went to work one night, and I turned around before we hit, and there was the head of the theory department in the first table. So, well, I had to play. I was working. So after the set, I had to go over and say something. I said, hello, Mr. Sterling. And I was expecting him to say, we'll see you in the office tomorrow, you know. And he simply said, nice set. I said, what? Wow. And they had the practice rooms there. The practice rooms, you could have them beginning at 7 o'clock in the morning. Nobody went to the practice room at 7 o'clock. But see, I was trying to write music during that time and write tunes, so I would be there at 7 o'clock. And I'd go up on the 3rd floor and take an obscure room in the back so nobody would know I was there. But right across from that practice room was the office of Louis Vaughan Jones, head of the violin department. Oh, nobody's there at that time. And I'm trying to write this tune, and I got up to what would be the bridge, and I couldn't get it together, and I'd start all over again. And I must have done that about 8 or 10 times. And I heard this door burst open across the hall. Louis Vaughan Jones was in his office. And then the door to my room burst open, and there he was, standing in the doorway, and I expected him to say, down the office. And he simply said, resolve it, resolve it. And Louis Vaughan Jones was cool. And I'm here today. Yeah, and I was a pill. After a couple of years, I got some of the theory under my belt, and then I began to get different ideas. And they would give me a cantus firmus that we had to put something to. And I knew I was breaking all the rules. Because I was hearing stuff, you know. And each morning, the classes were small, about 8 of us in a class. The teacher would play our homework. Ah, Mrs. Jones, I got your use of the Neapolitan 6 here. Oh, Mr. Thompson, your deceptive cadence was, oh, very nice. And she put mine up there. She played the first chord, and the red pencil would say, zap, zap. Then she played the next one, and the red pencil would say, zap, zap. And it looked like blood. And she put the pencil down in disgust, and she said, Mr. Golson, what have you done? I was so angry and indignant, I stood up, jammed my hands in my pocket, and I said, that's the way I heard it. Mr. Golson. But years later, yeah, maybe they had time to think about it. About 40 years later, they came, they brought me back. Now, I thought they lost their senses. They brought me back to honor me. They offered me a teaching position, and they instituted the BN Golson Scholarship every year. I thought I was going crazy. The pill, I couldn't believe it. You know, strange things can happen. You know, and one of the big things there, oh, Mr. Golson, you must approach the dominant from the tonic from the dominant, from the fifth position. And I said, why? He said, that's the rule. I said, well, can't you break the rule if the ear accepts it? Ah, Mr. Golson. I wrote a song called Killer Joe that goes back to the tonic from the sixth position, and nobody has ever complained. Strange things can happen, but what's happening to you? You got any questions? I don't know everything, but I know some things. No questions?
I want to know how you met Art Farmer.
I met Art Farmer in 1953. I was playing with, who was I playing with? Oh, yes. I'm embarrassed to tell you who I was playing with. I was playing with Bull Moose Jackson and his Buffalo Bearcats. And I was a Bearcat. It was a rhythm and blues band. They didn't want to know anything about jazz. I said, jazz? But I left him, and I got an offer from, I just come off a gig with Tad Dameron, and I got an offer to go with him. And that's where I met Quincy Jones was in that band, Monk Montgomery, Jimmy Cleveland, the trombone player, G.G. Grice. Oh yeah, Clifford Brown was one of the trumpet players in that band, yeah. And I met Art Farmer. And I never heard such, that was in 1953, I never heard such a beautiful trumpet sound. I mean, he had that trumpet sound sounding like a flugelhorn before people started playing the flugelhorn. And then many years went by, we found ourselves in different situations. And years later, we formed a group called the Jazz Tet. And our first piano player was a 19-year-old kid nobody ever heard of called McCoy Tyner. Yeah, that was, things happen.
Thanks.
And, yes.
I could tell everybody the story about the Moanin', Bobby Timmons composition.
Does anybody here remember the tune called Moanin'?
Yeah.
Moanin', yeah. Who was I playing with? Oh, I was playing with Art Blakey. And our piano player was Bobby Timmons. Lee Morton was in that group, and Jimmy Merritt. And Bobby used to play, when we finish a tune, before we go into the next tune, sometimes Bobby used to play a little lick. And he played that little lick in between the tunes a lot. And we got to Cincinnati, no, it was Dayton. And I said, Bobby, you know that little lick you play all the time? I said, it's 8 bars. All you need is a bridge and you got a tune. He said, no, it's just a little lick I play. It's not a tune. I call it a rehearsal. They went, no, why you call it a rehearsal? Because we had everything down. He said, well, why the rehearsal? I said, Bobby, the rest of us are going to sit over here. We was in the club during the daytime. Nobody was there. I said, you go on the stage and write a bridge to that thing you play all the time. He said, what is that? I said, trust me. I used to say, trust me all the time. And most of the time, I didn't know what I was talking about. So he went up on the stage, and we sat there and all like that, Art, and to the end. Hair foul. He says, you want to listen to it? I said, okay, play it. And he played it. I said, Bobby, it hasn't got the same feeling and flavor as that thing that you play. He said, well, you write it. I said, no, it's got to be your tune. So he half-heartedly went at it, 15 minutes. He said, okay, you want to hear it? He didn't think much of it, and he played it, and I said, that's it. I said, we're going to play it. So I said, come on, D, we're going to get together and learn it. We're going to play it tonight. And the people are going to tell us what they think of it, you see. I said, but we have to give it a name. What kind of name are you going to call it? He said, I don't know. He says, I said, well, think of something. He said, well, I don't know. It sounds like somebody moaning. I said, okay, we'll call it Moanin'. And we played it that night. And there was no dancing in this club. We just came to hear the music. And I gave it a big build-up. We're going to play a tune. It's been originated right here. I've forgotten the name of that club, something. And you're going to be the first to hear it. And you're going to tell us what you think about it. Now, there was no dancing because there's no room for dancing. We started playing it. And the head started bobbing, and the fingers started snapping. And those people got up and tried to dance. They were knocking the drinks over. That's how Moonin was born. It happens, things happen like that. Yes?
Hi, Mr. Golson. Can you please tell us how you came to write the music for the TV show MASH?
Well, that was easy. They asked me. But what happened, no, it's a long story. Quincy Jones and I, when we were in New York, we used to live in the same building. I was on the 4th floor and he was on the 6th floor. So we saw each other all the time. And then he began to do some things, advance some things. And he decided to move to Los Angeles because he had got some offers to do like some music for a Walt Disney film and some other things. And it was feeling pretty good. And that kind of thing was out there. So he moved. And once he was out there, he kept telling me, why don't you come out? Then I don't know if you remember a jazz critic named Leonard Feather. He used to write for Downbeat years ago. He moved out there. And then he was telling me, why don't you come out? So the both of them were saying, come out, come out. Go west, young man. So I moved out there too. Now he had an agent, and you don't know if you remember a band leader called Percy Faith. He made beautiful music, but he had a son who was an agent, a composer, an agent for composers, and Quincy locked up with him, Peter Faith. And I got out there, and he hooked me up also with Peter Faith. So Peter had entry into all the studios, and he spoke to Universal. Wait a minute, who was that? No, wait a minute, MASH. No, that was 20th Century. So he spoke to 20th Century about me, and they just, what's that? Yeah, that was it, but there was one before that. And they called me out there to write this music for MASH. And it was only a 30-minute show, so this is the barometer. If the show is exceptionally good, you don't need much music. If you ever see a film and there's a lot of music in it, the film is not so good because the music has got to create the emotion. But if the film is good, the emotion comes from the film itself, so you don't need much music. So for a half-hour show, I would write maybe 10 minutes of music or something like that. They're just plain people, as it turns out, who happens to be doing what they're doing. Some of them are famous, some of them are not so famous. One of the most famous ones I know is Steven Spielberg. Yeah, he's just like us. He's got nothing to prove, but he's proved everything. The man's a genius. And I told, when I first met him, I met him in Montreal, and we were supposed to talk some business, and when his people came in, they came over to me and said, "Are you BN Duke Auditorium?" I said, "Yes, Stephen wants to speak to you." And I got ready to get up to go with it. He had a whole entourage there, secretaries and stuff. And he says, "Oh no, he'll come over." And when he came over, my wife and I were in the restaurant, there was nowhere for him to sit. And I was looking for a chair, and he just knelt down on the floor like that and started talking like old times. I said, wow. And then I did something bizarre. I said, "Stephen, would you stand up? I promised if I ever met you, I was going to do this." And he stood up, and I stood up, and I kissed him. And he fell out laughing. Just ordinary. He started telling me about his mother had a delicatessen, he's trying to get her to give it up. And like old Quincy Jones, my ex-roommate, he found out when we were doing the terminals thing. And Stephen, we were right in the middle of things, and somehow he happened to mention Quincy Jones. And I said, "Yeah, we used to be roommates when we were with Dizzy Gillespie." And he stopped the whole operation and got his cell phone to call Quincy Jones. I said, "When you call him, don't refer to him as Quincy. Refer to him as Tack." He said, "Well, why?" I said, "Just refer to him as Tack." So he called him, but Quincy wasn't home. So we went on doing what we were doing. And when I got back to LA, Quincy called me. And he said, Stephen called me and told me what you all were doing. And he said, he called me Tack. And when he called me Tack, I told him, damn it, you've been talking to Benny Golson.
Go ahead.
Your mic in place?
Yes, sir.
You're tuned to 90.7 FM, where WNCU proudly presenting and preserving America's treasure here in North Carolina Central University. Midday Jazz for your listening pleasure. And hearing music from Benny Golson's quintet, the Domingo, is a tune that you heard. Benny Golson, the composition, Benny Golson on the tenor sax, Curtis Fuller on the trombone, Kevin Hayes at the piano, Tony Rita songs around us here at WNCU. And we're honored to have the wonderful, great Benny Golson in studio with us this afternoon, as well as Bouna Ndiaye. Benny Golson is going to be performing a part of the 23rd annual NCCU Jazz Festival. He performs tonight along with the NCCU Jazz Ensemble. Showtime is 8 p.m. in BN Duke Auditorium. We invite you to come down and welcome to WNCU and welcome to NCCU Benny Golson. Thank you for coming in.
Boy, it's great to be here.
And welcome, Bouna.
Thank you so much.
Bouna is going to honor us by interviewing Benny Golson this afternoon here on Midday Jazz, and we'll be playing music that Benny Golson has actually selected out. We've got some of the CDs in the studio. We'll be presenting his music. But go ahead, Bouna.
Well, Aasim, thank you so much for having me. I do African music. I do Bonjour Africa, but I am very close to Benny Golson and the jazz that he represents. We met in Senegal at the St. Louis Jazz Festival. That was after I brought in, when I was program coordinator at Duke University, Miss Jean Buck. For those of you who don't know who Jean is, let me just ask Benny Golson. Hello, Benny. Can you tell us a little bit about Jean Buck?
Jean Buck is a lover of jazz. I met Jean years ago. She goes way back to Duke Ellington, Count Basie. That was long before I knew her. There was a friend that was a very good friend of hers who used to play at the Carlisle. What was his name? I can't remember his name.
The singer?
Yeah, singer.
Troop? Bobby Troop?
No, not Bobby
Okay.
Troop. Bobby's is another one because I introduced him as Bobby Troop once. I was embarrassed. Bobby, oh, he was amazing. He was at that club for years. I can't remember his last name. It's terrible. But anyway, yeah, and I met him through her. And she took an interest in this photograph, Great Day in Harlem. And she did quite a few things with that picture. We took that picture, it was just a picture. It was in Esquire magazine. I read the magazine, and like all magazines, eventually I threw it in the trash. And I had the occasion to go to Columbia Records to talk with Bruce Lundvall, who was the president of Columbia Records at the time, and he had it on the wall. And I said to him, you know, Bruce, I'm sorry that I threw that picture where I had it in the magazine. I went back to Los Angeles in a week. The mail came. It was a big photograph from him. I called him and thanked him, and I think I thanked Jean for all she had done relative to the picture.
Yes, that was very interesting. My meeting with Jean came from a lady in Chicago, Donna Hollifield. Jean went to Chicago to present A Great Day in Harlem. And that lady whom I knew sent me later an email, not an email, excuse me, he doesn't do email, a letter telling me that there is this lady named Jean Buck who has this great jazz documentary that you need to look into if you are interested in doing some programming here in North Carolina. And of course I was. So I talked to Jean Buck. And I said, Jean, I want you to come here to North Carolina to present for the screening of A Great Day in Harlem. Tell me how much. And we went all through these arrangements and finance and all that. And I brought here Jean. Well, later on, I went to Senegal, to the St. Louis Jazz Festival. And who was the headliner? Mr. Benny Golson. All right, we had a good time there. But we didn't have enough time to talk about all these things. At that time, you had your CD, The Terminal, out.
Oh, yes.
Now tell me about The Terminal and The Terminal, the movie itself. What connection is there?
I got a call while I was in Europe from my office, which is in Los Angeles. And they said, we got a call today from Steven Spielberg's office. They want to know if you're interested in appearing in a picture with Tom Hanks. And I told her no. She was surprised. She said no. And then I explained to her why. I'd gotten calls from advertising agencies to come in and maybe be a part of a commercial. I never got the parts. I got a call twice from Woody Allen. I never got chose. I said, no, it's another one of those. She said, no, he wants you. I said, really? So then I got in touch with his office, and they sent me a script, short script of what they wanted me to say in the film. And I had to go downtown to New York to some place that recorded it. And they were happy, but they saw the look on my face that I wasn't too happy. They said, well, what's wrong? I said, well, a musician might say that, but he wouldn't say it quite like that. They said, well, let's do it again. So we did it again, and they sent it to Steven Spielberg, and he said, that's it. Then they said, okay, you and the group will come to Montreal, Canada. That's where you're going to, we're going to shoot this. And Steven said to me, we're going to, he had rented an abandoned airplane hangar. He said, we're going to make a nightclub scene for you. What kind of piano would you like to have? I said, a 12-foot Steinway grand. When I got there, it was there.
That's a very interesting nice story.
This is one of the musical selections that Benny Golson has chosen for us. It's music from his release called Tenor Legacy, Never Come Back to Me. And I see that you dedicated this tune to the great Ben Webster.
Right. We put this together. The record company wanted me to do something representing other musicians. And I remember Ben playing this tune. As a matter of fact, we did Body and Soul too. And we used somebody that you might know from here named Branford Marsalis.
Oh, yeah.
He was on it with a tribute to Coleman Hawkins. And we did some other things too. And it turned out to be interesting.
So Benny, jazz is something that was born here in the United States, but is loved all over the planet. Tell us about jazz in different parts of the country, of the world. Your experiences also about that.
Jazz outside of the United States and almost every country I've played in has somehow a deeper and a greater appreciation than we have. Here we sort of take it for granted because you can hear it here and there, a bar on the corner, and you can buy the records. You can go see these people in different venues, expensive venues or cheaper venues. But there they don't have that much exposure to it, or they didn't in the past. Of course, now there's more exposure, and their ability to approximate the level that we play when we play it has really risen, especially in Japan. There's Watanasada Watanabe mentioned just now. There was a group there too, Subo Nobuhara and his Sharps and Flats, the big band from, yeah, they're fantastic. And there was a tenor player, Sleepy Moto, I think was his name, tenor player. Fantastic. They had a youth band too. I heard a band I was approaching with Dizzy Gillespie and Thad Jones. And we heard this band playing, and when we got to the room, it was a bunch of kids, 13, 14, and 15 years old, playing big band arrangements.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. Oh yeah. And even in Russia. We went to Siberia, and they had a tenor player, piano player, bass player that were killing. You would have thought you were in New York City. Yeah. The level of playing has come up too.
Well, when we met, this is the second time. The first time we met, that was in Senegal at the St. Louis Jazz Festival.
Yes.
And you were the headliner of that particular performance. Could you tell us your experience being in Senegal and being at the St. Louis Jazz Festival?
Well, when we were going there, I didn't know quite what to expect. I have to tell you something that doesn't have anything to do with the music that I just told you. I had the best lamb chops I ever had in my life. I ate lamb chops every day, so when I didn't turn into a sheep. But the acceptance of the music from the people came as a surprise. Surprise only because I didn't know what to expect. And it was delightful being there.
Here's another tune that Mr. Golson has chosen for us. Blues March is one of your most famous tunes, I guess.
Yes, this treatment is a little different, as you'll hear.
Yeah.
So everything's delayed.
I'm going to give you, it's from your release called That's Funky. Blues March here at 90.7 WNCU.
Blues March with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers in Tokyo, 1988.
Yeah.
I was there.
Isn't that something?
I was there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, all the Frank Lacey, all of them were there.
You remember that?
Yeah, with this coat and tie, shirt and tie. Everybody neat.
Frank Lacey.
Yeah.
Yeah, delayed.
He had something.
It's time for him to go.
Okay. Well,
We're going to wrap this up in
we
just
close
a
that.
few minutes, 5 minutes, all right? Okay, we're going to back out of this and they say you got to go. Blues March, music from a release called That's Funky from BN Duke Golson's quintet. And Bouna, we got to wrap this up shortly, and so
Sure.
he has to
Now,
go.
I have a last question that I will ask Mr. Golson here. If you were asked to perform tonight with one of the deceased musicians that you know, only one that you will pick, who would that be?
One of the ones from what we played so
From the Great Day in Harlem Photography.
Art Farmer.
Art Farm. Okay.
That's who you're standing next to right in the picture.
Right.
That's right, that's right. Well, I think that everybody's waiting for you. Just send your last message to the listeners of the Afternoon Jazz right here on WNCU with Mr. Aasim Inshirah.
Yeah, I tell them to keep listening because it was a surprise to me. High-level stuff.
We're going
you,
to close out. Thank you so much for coming over, Mr. Golson. And folks, turn out because performance 8 p.m. in BN Duke Auditorium here at North Carolina Central University. The great BN Golson performing along with the NCCU Jazz Ensemble. He picked Jam the Avenue. This is for you, John. This is what we're going to close out with. For 90.7 WNCU, thank you so much. And come on out and enjoy the concert tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. That is some tiny writing. Great googly woogums. This is the closest I've ever been to paradise. Sweet.
That's great.
Benny Golson. Awesome.
You
Thank
did it.
you.